there were so many of us. There were so many people doing so many different kinds of things. I mean, the way I experienced the San Francisco counterculture at the time was that it was many braided strands of involvement. And I kind of immediately got trained in the environmental aspect of it. But across the bay, there were the Black Panthers in full swing, and there were SDS people. Many of these strands had very little overlap with one another, very little overlap. But they all had things in common. And that's one of the reasons the term counterculture has relevance for me. Also subculture. I mean, the subculture always exists. And I really think of the roots of the 60s subculture starting with the Romantics, nearly a century before the Bohemians. I mean, there's this theme in human culture has been around for a long time, in Western culture anyway. So I got involved with Heath Lampy, Ponderosa Pine, who had changed his name to Ponderosa Pine by that time, which was an outrageous thing to do. And he was sending out a newsletter once a month that was pretty radical environmental thinking to a group of his addressees that he thought should hear the message. They weren't soliciting his message. And so I was plunged immediately into sort of the extreme part of the environmental movement, which was radical. He was very good friends with Gary, and Gary would come to the house and sit and talk with other people about the philosophy. And I remember sitting in the shadows and listening to conversation among maybe 5 people, including Gary, in which they were developing the basis for the little document called The Four Changes. And that was probably in 69, where radical environmentalism was at that moment. And then, of course, as you know, we got involved with other publications, Clear Creek. I was an editor in Clear Creek in probably 1970. And we were soliciting articles from everybody who was relevant to the topic, including poets. I mean, Gary and all his friends were, I think, a tremendous impetus to the environmental movement. The environmental stream in the counterculture movement that was going on then in San Francisco, which was different from hippies. Hippies were their own stream. These were the kind of the back to the land people who moved out into the country. You know, Peter Coyote was one of these people, and